Also joins us live now. Conflicting messages there coming from President Trump. On the one hand, the US pulled out to pave the way for Turkey, and now on the other hand, President Trump saying it's a bad idea. So which is it? Conflicting messages.
Yeah, and I think the key thing is to remember that the US obviously has key strategic goals and interests in Syria. There's obviously the ISIS component of this, which has been pretty much driving Syria policy for some years. The US has to ensure that there isn't any kind of regional fallout. It has to prevent any kind of refugee crisis bubbling up again. And it also, of course, has to try and contain Iran, which has been another key component, not just of the Trump administration, but of several administrations before it. So there's a lot of plates up there. There's a lot of plates that the US has got to try and spin. And obviously, this is an extraordinarily complicated time to try and do so.
And do you think, I mean, there have been many concerns that Daesh will rise again and that this will give them the opportunity to do so. Do you think this is a reasonable concern?
Yeah, it's absolutely a reasonable concern to be focused on ISIS in Syria and Iraq. It was a vital thing that the caliphate was destroyed, that territory in Syria was taken back from ISIS, and obviously used that as a base to carry out a series of attacks around the world and enslave essentially a section of people in Syria as well as Iraq. This is a group we've got to be very concerned about, and anything that could lead to them being strengthened is something that the US and all of its allies absolutely need to guard against.
Yeah, I mean, presumably it's not just a responsibility for Turkey, but a responsibility for the international community.
Well, yeah, I mean, the international community came together to try and defeat ISIS after it had taken this territory. Now, I think with the way things have panned out, with the US allowing Turkey to create this buffer zone, the US has almost placed the emphasis on Turkey to try and deal with it. But, you know, it's not just a case of establishing the buffer zone. There's also all these detainee camps that Turkey is potentially going to have to take ownership of. There's ISIS fighters within them, also ISIS fighters from places like Europe, for example. Countries in Europe don't want these fighters back. So then how does Turkey begin to deal with that? Does Turkey want to take that burden on alone? I think it's quite a challenging prospect for them.
OK, Robin Simcox joining us from Washington, D.C. Well, Fadel Abdul Ghani